Welcome back to my channel, guys. For those of you who are new, I'm the marketing nomad. Alright, so today I've got a pretty interesting video and I'm going to be spilling some secrets on how I create my social media strategy from scratch. Without further ado, let's get down to business. Now, social media strategy is nothing but answering a bunch of questions and making sure you tie all of those answers together. The more questions that you can answer, the more easier it is to tie those all together. Now, when I'm creating a social media strategy, I usually divide it into different sections. The first section that I'm going to be talking about are your goals. Now, when you are talking about goals, I don't just mean setting your key performance indicators. You need to go deeper than that. You need to figure out what exactly are you trying to achieve with this social media strategy. Are you trying to maybe say build relationships with your existing clients? Are you maybe say trying to make sales online? Are you maybe say trying to get new customers to your page? You need to figure out what exactly is your end game to this social media strategy. A pro tip that I do have for you is to keep one goal per social media platform. That way you're not confusing your viewers and you have a proper strategy to your content as well. So once we've figured out this section and you are sure of your goal for each social media platform, the next thing is to understand your target audience. Now in this section, we're going to be asking ourselves questions about our target audience and try to understand what kind of content would they be interested in. Now there are different kinds of content that can be considered as valuable to your audience. For some audiences, they prefer humorous content. For them, that is valuable content. For others, it could be breaking news. For another sect of audience, it could be, as I said, educational content. You need to figure out what exactly is going to make your target audience hit that follow button. The more you understand their preferences, the more you will be able to draft your content. Another pro tip that I do have for you is to figure out where you can find this target audience. Suppose you are targeting existing clients. Do you find them on LinkedIn? Do you find them on Facebook? Do you find them on Instagram? Figuring out which platform you're going to target is important, and figuring out where your audience is hanging out is actually super important. Now, another pro tip that I do have for you is to ask your audience yourself. To an extent, you will be able to figure out their preference, but you can't really know it for sure until you ask them. You can use the poll features that are available on your Instagram stories, your Facebook stories, and right now they've come onto LinkedIn as well. So make sure that you are taking advantage and checking in with your audience as to what would they prefer. Now, on a side note, I actually do ask my audience every single month if they're okay with the kind of content I'm putting out and if there's something new that they would like to see. Another reason that I do this is that your audience's preference can keep changing depending on external factors. The best thing to do is to ask them yourself. Now, once we've figured out our goals, we've figured out our target audience, the next thing to do is take a sneak peek at what your competition is up to. What is the audience that they are targeting? Do you want to target the same audience? What exactly are their goals? Do you want to keep the same goals? What are the kind of content that they are putting out? Are their target audience reacting the same way as you would expect them to? What are the types of posts that are performing really well on their social media platform? I just scratched myself. Okay, if you are targeting the same target audience, then maybe those types of posts would be something that you can focus on. Maybe images work better than videos, or vice versa. These are things that you really have to figure when you are looking at your competition. A pro tip and a cautionary tip, I would say, that I do have for you is that you are getting inspired by their content and you are not imitating their content. When you imitate content, it can actually piss off your consumers. So make sure you are keeping that in mind when you are drafting your content. So right now we've figured out our goals, we've figured out our target audience, and we've taken a look at our competition. The next thing you need to do is to figure out what is comfortable for you. What sort of frequency is something that you can consistently post quality content? If you can post 3 times a week and they're absolutely fantastic quality content, go for it. I would rather you do that than post maybe 5 subpar content. So make sure that you are keeping that in mind. Another question that you can ask yourself in this section is to understand what kind of tone you want to make sure that you will consistently keep it up all throughout. So in this section, it's all about understanding your tone, the frequency, and what kind of content that you can consistently create and make sure that your audience will view it as valuable and quality content. Now, just a quick review. We've figured out our goals, we've figured out our target audience, we've taken a look at our competition, and we've also decided something that will help us maintain consistent quality content. The next thing that you really have to talk about is understanding how is the look and feel going to be. Now in this section, you're gonna understand what is the look and feel and how are you going to maintain brand consistency all throughout your content. Now, a pro tip that I do have for you is to make sure that your brand colors are absolutely visible. In an occasion where you are unable to put your brand colors, I would suggest putting a translucent logo of yours in your content. Now, the reason behind that is this. When your audience is flipping through their newsfeed, most of the times it's going to be super quick. You want to make sure that your colors are popping out, and even if they're not reading your content, you want to make sure that it registers in their mind that you have posted something. It helps you stay in their mind, and it also helps with brand recall as well. So this is a huge pro tip that I follow with all my posts, and I do recommend my clients to follow the same as well. Another thing that you can think about is whether you want to have a particular layout to your entire feed. Now, on Instagram, it's going to be a visual layout that I'm talking about, but on LinkedIn, suppose you want to keep specific content for specific days. Suppose on Mondays, maybe you want to post a quote. On Wednesdays, maybe you want to share some industry information. And maybe on Fridays, you want to keep it fun and you want to share a humorous post. So trying to figure out a layout to your post can be helpful. So at this point, we've sort of figured out our layout. We kind of know how we want our page to look, and we've also figured out what our audience could potentially be looking for. At this point, it is important to create a social media calendar. I'm going to share a snapshot of my social media calendar, and I think that would be able to help you as well. Now, when you are creating a social media calendar, it doesn't have to be complicated. And this is a pro tip that I do have for you. It can be as simple as just starting an Excel sheet. You can even use Google Sheets in case you have a team of 5 and you want to share your calendar with everyone else as well. So for me, it's just me. So I actually just have an Excel sheet of my social media calendar. It just has to be that simple, guys. One thing that I do want to talk about is keeping your social media calendar as simple as possible. I know that there are a lot of social media apps that can help you with this, but in my experience, that has always just complicated things a lot. For me, I just use an Excel sheet where I put in my date, I put in the content that I do want to put out for that day, and I also add in additional notes that I could add. Suppose I want to maybe put in a freebie with a particular content that I want to put out, I do put in that in my notes as well. On top of that, I do have a running list of ideas which I just dump every single thing that comes to my mind, and I look through it every time I'm free. Now, having dates set out in my content calendar has actually helped me make sure that I am consistently creating content and I'm not messing my deadlines. So that is, I think, a pro tip that I do have for you, is to make sure that you are as specific as possible in your calendar. This is a snapshot of my calendar. As you guys can see, I've put in the date, I've put in the topic for the week. That's kind of a layout that I'm going with. And I also put in the topic, I also put in what kind of color I want that post to be. After that, you can also see my idea dump column at the end, where I just put in any and everything that comes to my mind, and I go over it when I'm free. Another thing that I do use is Google Calendar. On the days that I do have to draft my content and design my content, I make sure that I put in a little bit of a note over there, just so that I'm aware of my deadlines. This is another pro tip that I do have for you. And if you are a team of more than one, you can also share this Google Calendar with your teammates, and it becomes super easy to collaborate with them. This is another pro tip that I do have for you. Another thing that people usually ask me are about paid scheduling apps. Now, previously, I used to pay $20 a month for a scheduling app. And while that worked out okay for me at that point, I realized that there was a free app that I could now schedule my content from, especially when it came to Facebook and Instagram. So using scheduling apps are kind of a pro, and I would recommend them. But for Facebook and Instagram, I would highly recommend using Facebook Creator Studio. It's super easy to schedule any kind of content, and you also have insights available right on there. For other social media platforms, I would recommend keeping a scheduling app. If you guys would like a video on me reviewing scheduling apps, feel free to mention it in the comments below and I will get right to it. However, for Facebook and for Instagram, I would highly recommend using Facebook Creator Studio. It is by Facebook and it is so easy to just integrate everything, to schedule everything, and it is a breeze. I've actually created a video on Facebook Creator Studio, the basics of it. Feel free to check it out. I'll put it in the description box and I'll also put it up here as well. One of the questions that I do get a lot is how often should I be promoting my services on social media platforms? Now, this is actually a really cool question, and a healthy ratio that I personally found in my experience is 3:1. For every 3 posts that are value content, I would say, put out 1 promotional post. This makes your audience comfortable with the idea that you are not just promoting your services or your products on social media. That would also encourage them to follow you, and I would say that they would be more receptive to your promotions if you keep a healthy balance. So I would say for every 3 value content, post 1 promotional content. Now we've created our social media calendar, and now's the time to just put in your topics. One pro tip that I do have for you is to make sure that you are keeping one goal in mind and keeping one target audience in mind. When you keep different target audiences in mind, you're gonna be mixing up your content and it's not going to look pretty. You're gonna have a lot of unfollows and follows, and it's not going to maintain that consistent engagement that you are looking for. So I would highly recommend keeping your target audience in mind and keeping your goals in mind before you list out your topics. Now, based off of the calendar that you've just created, you have a list of topics, you've got the days that you want to schedule it, you've also created days that you are going to be designing these content as well. So now that we've figured out all of these, that actually wraps up 3/4 of your strategy. The next 2 points that I'm going to be talking about are super important and must not be overlooked at any given point. The next big step is for you to continuously understand your audience's reaction and their engagement levels with each of the content that you are posting. Suppose you just posted today. Take a look at your analytics for that post, maybe say a week later. Try to figure out the engagement. Try to figure out if your audience is happy with that kind of content. Maybe try to re-strategize and refocus your content to something else. If you find that your engagement levels are not up to the mark, then maybe you have to rethink your strategy and go back and answer each of these questions again. One of the pro tips that I did mention before, and I'm going to talk about it again because that is super important, is to ask your audience. Now, one of the biggest reasons why you should constantly keep analyzing your audience's reaction is that when you start out in the beginning, it might not be clear to you what your audience is looking for. As your social media platform grows, as you put out more content over there, you can understand what your audience wants better. And as you get more followers, it becomes more and more clear which direction your social media platform should be heading. So this is why I highly recommend constantly analyzing your insights, your engagement, and your audience's reaction, and keep asking them what they prefer. Every single month, just before the month ends, when I am creating my strategy for the next month, I always ask my audience what would they prefer to see. I take a look at whether they liked my content, whether they're expecting more from me or they're expecting something else. I also ask a few minor questions that can get me to understand where their mindset is at. So this is something that I would highly recommend you to do as well. And the last step to all of this is to experiment. Now, the reason why I say you have to experiment with different types of content is because sometimes your audience themselves might not really understand what they are looking for. And it is up to you to kind of bring in that new perspective and that new type of content that they didn't know they wanted all along. If you guys are following me on Instagram, you would absolutely know that I love experimenting with my content. The content that I started out and the content that I have today is completely different. If I never experimented with my content, I would never have reached where I am today with my content. And I am going to keep continuing to experiment with different types of content and keep gauging my audience's reaction to it as well. Alright guys, that brings me to the end of this video, and by now I hope that you have understood how to create a social media strategy from scratch and how to make sure you are optimizing it for success. If you thought this video was super useful, don't forget to like this video and share this video with all your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel because this is where all the fun marketing stuff happens. Alright guys, until my next video, please stay safe, please stay healthy. I will see you in a few days. By their content and you are not imitating their content.